Fight Club 2016. Today we are here to debate whether or not Twitter supports free speech. Joining me is Lachlan Marquet from the Washington Free Beacon and Ed Morrissey with Hot Air. Lachlan, take it away.
Sure. So we all know that Twitter is a private company, obviously, and thereby is not bound by the First Amendment, and that's usually where this debate leads. But I think that actually, that's true, and they are not under any obligation to support free speech and to allow people to say whatever they want. But I think it's actually a deeper issue, and I think they're actually obligated to not be free speech extremists or absolutists or whatever you want to call it. I think they are obligated to step in and enforce a, if not civil, then at least structured discourse. And I think censorship is really baked into the entire platform of Twitter in the form of the 140 character limit. That in itself is a limit on free speech. And we recognize that that's necessary when you have essentially a conversation between tens of millions of people, ongoing conversation, that there needs to be some sort of structure and some sort of limit in terms of what people can say in order to allow that conversation to flourish. So when it comes to these debates over people getting banned from Twitter or getting their verification removed or whatever it is, I think the central question from Twitter's perspective is and should be, what rules of the road do we need to enforce in order to ensure that a type of effective conversation or exchange of ideas or just general humor and frivolity can take place. And unfortunately, we've seen a lot of trends over the past couple of years that have made that sort of exchange virtually impossible. These sort of Twitter mobs that get whipped up on these very heated issues that end up, I've certainly been the target of it. I'm sure you have too, Ed, where you say something that someone doesn't like, a very widely followed person tweets it or says something mean about it, and all of a sudden your Twitter feed is just flooded with these crazy people hurling all kinds of nasty insults at you, and you just want to turn it off, and it makes conversation absolutely impossible. So I think Twitter is not just in the right in enforcing those sorts of rules of the road, but it's incumbent on them to do so. Now, there are two caveats to that, and one is that it needs to be content neutral. They can't be discriminating against people because of their political views, and there are allegations that they have been doing that. I think that's very problematic. And as a corollary to that, they need to be transparent about why they're doing this. They need to make it very clear if someone gets their account suspended or whatever consequence it is, why that happened, exactly what they did that violated exactly which guidelines that Twitter has put in place. And I think if they're doing that, if they're transparent about it and they're content neutral, I think it's perfectly fine that they should crack down a little bit, censor a little bit in the interests of that free discourse.
Well, what you propose is very reasonable. Unfortunately, as we've seen numerous times now on Twitter, it's just not very workable. And let's step back a little bit and remember what Twitter is. It's a social media network. And the idea behind social media networks is to create sort of freestanding social media associations. And Twitter offers a number of tools to its users to police that for themselves. And yes, I have been, on occasion, the center of Twitter storms. And yes, on occasion I have walked away from Twitter and come back a couple hours later, cleared the timeline, started fresh, and you know what, it's fine. It's fine. That's what I can do without shutting down somebody else's right to have an association in this, and I say the word right advisedly.
Understood.
To have their own associations within this network. And I think Twitter has to ask itself, are they a social media network or are they a social position network? Because how it's working out in practice is they are making themselves a social position network. And that is not what Twitter was supposed to be. In fact, that's not even what Twitter is designed to be. Twitter is designed to be a completely ground up conversation, 140 characters at a time, between people who know each other or know of each other, who can enter into discussions and exit out of discussions as they like. And if you don't happen to like the fact that somebody's badgering you on Twitter, you just simply put them on a block list, or you put them on a mute list, which is, in my estimation, even better, because then they don't get the satisfaction of knowing that you're not listening to them, which is even better. And you can actually mute hashtags, you can actually mute for particular terms. So if you don't like an F-bomb, you can mute all the tweets that are utilizing that particular form of communication. What happened with Stacey, and what's happened with some of our other colleagues on the right is that they are being banned or shadow banned because of their content. Let's not pretend that Stacey McCain is any more vitriolic than people who are part of, and I'm just going to offer up a few things, and this is not a judgment on the movements as a whole, but some members of Black Lives Matter, some members of the Occupy movement, some members of other left grassroots hashtag movements. Those people have been just as vitriolic, if not more so, than Stacey McCain. Some of the people that he's criticizing in the feminist movement are just as vitriolic on Twitter. They're not getting banned. So the reason why is because they shouldn't be. I don't necessarily need to follow Anita Sarkeesian, and I'm not accusing her of anything. I'm just using it as an example because that's one of Stacey's bête noirs on Twitter. I can simply not follow her. If she tweets into my timeline, I can mute her or I can block her. That's all you really need. If Twitter wanted to do something to improve its usability for the people who are engaging in that, they would improve the mute and block functions to have time to mute and block. Because sometimes people just get crazy and you just need to turn them off for a little while, but you want to eventually get them back in the conversation. They don't have those types of tools. You're either banned or you're blocked or you're muted or whatever. Or, you're either blocked or you're muted and that's it. But if we want to have a rational discourse, then that means that everybody's points of view should be allowed into that forum. Otherwise, what you have is what we've got right now, which is a star chamber of people from the left who are determining what discourse they think is allowable on Twitter, and it's very much like the political correctness that we're seeing a rebellion against, for better or worse, with the Donald Trump phenomenon, where you have the media and you have intellectuals that are just saying some things are just out of bounds for public discourse, like skepticism over climate change or discussions of pro-life positions and that sort of thing. And we should ban weather people who don't buy into anthropogenic climate change from being meteorologists on television, that sort of thing. That's what you end up with when you start going down that road. I think that Twitter should recast itself as an open forum and allow better tools so that people who really do want to protect themselves from vitriolic type of conversations and let's face it, vengeful type of communications on Twitter, we've all been on the receiving end of that, have ways to block that out or tune it out.
Well, Ed, let me ask you this, and I asked for quick responses because there's one more question I want to get to, yes. But it brings us to a bigger question, is that do private businesses have the right to run their business in accordance to their values? If Twitter happens to associate with itself and have values that associate with the left, do they have a right to run their business in accordance to that?
Absolutely they do. Absolutely, their platform, their rules, but let's make the rules clear. And let's not pretend that that these rules aren't already in place and the content is not already driving those decisions. Because Twitter wants it both ways. They want to say we're about speech, we're about social connection, we're about making new communities, and then they're blocking people from being able to do that, and they're excluding people on the basis of political orientation.
No, I actually agree, and I think that Twitter would do itself a favor if it would stop pretending to be an open platform, because I don't think it needs to be. And I think there are a lot of other media, online media, where you can have more of a sort of free-flowing discourse, places like Reddit, although many Redditors would say that's gone by the wayside recently. Changed, right? Yeah. And very much, in the same vein as Twitter, part of that same culture. I do think they need to drop any pretense of being, about, I think they said they're the free speech wing of the free speech movement. That's nonsense. And they might profess that in their personal lives, and they might believe that in their heart of hearts, but they are not, and in my opinion, should not be running Twitter that way. I think it does need to be structured. And when it comes to the case of Stacey McCain, who I know and like, and I'm sad to see that he was taken off Twitter like he was, I think that goes back to my point about transparency. It's very difficult to know what exactly set this episode off, because Twitter simply hasn't said. So I can't say that that they were or were not justified in removing his account, because I simply don't know what the cause for that was. And I think that's a serious problem. And if they would just make that explicit and lay out their case, It wouldn't satisfy everyone, but I think they'd be in a much more, beneficial position in terms of defending their own actions.
And very quickly, if conservatives feel that they are being targeted and treated unfairly by Twitter, how do you think they should respond?
Number one, stop buying ads on Twitter. They survive off of revenue. Their stock is already not doing very well, and no social media lasts forever. And another platform will replace Twitter if people feel that that they're getting the shaft from this company, and it should. And I think conservatives might end up settling on a different platform if they feel that way. And I think that's a totally healthy solution.
Absolutely. Actually, I agree with Lachlan on this. I think it's a free market. Somebody needs to come up with a better platform. And I think you'd see a migration, not just of conservatives, but people who value free speech and who value the interaction would end up migrating to a platform that had less of a top-down, politically correct control over what's going out over that network. So absolutely, I think that's the case. I mean, what was it? 12 years ago, MySpace was the place to be. Where's MySpace today? And that wasn't even about political correction. It was just about the fact that the technology evolved and the hipness involved, and now Twitter's actually sort of becoming passe. I'm hearing that Snapchat's where it's at. I'm kind of old, so I thought I was hip being on Twitter, but I don't know.
Well, great debate. Thank you both for joining Fight Club. We're going to leave it up to the voters at home to decide.